Big one. It is the big one, ladies and gentlemen. McLaren. McLaren. The team of my own heart. I just cannot see us improving in 2023 though. Should we talk about it? Shall we talk about it? Already a very good point in the chat. They're going to struggle because Stella is involved. They've said that this is a learning year already. Substantial improvements. They haven't been able to improve their wind tunnel. Yes, let's delve into it all, shall we? Let's start off with just like the team themselves. I kind of got up the Formula One article about McLaren. We can kind of just have a chat about McLaren for like 10 or so minutes before the livery and car reveal itself, whether we'll actually see the full car or just a livery. Most of these have just been a livery, so I'm not expecting a massive amount from this, but we'll have to wait and see. And let's talk McLaren then. So McLaren being talked about as kind of that midfield package, obviously best of the rest is kind of the tag that we want to go for as McLaren at this moment in time. We lost out on that last year to Alpine. They ended up coming fourth. You think back to 2021, we were battling for third with Ferrari. Then we were nowhere near the top three. We were kind of battling for top four, and we end up coming fifth. And I feel like this year we're going to be battling for top five. We're going to come sixth, and it's just slowly slipping away from us. Hello, Jamie, mate. How are we doing? Anyway, should we have a little look? This team guide for McLaren, it breaks down a little bit of the team. Obviously, the drivers we can talk about too, and what we expect from 2023 from the two. Let's talk Lando Norris first, because he's the first one that pops up. 1 pole position, 6 podiums, 428 points, 82 starts. For me, the second best driver on the Formula One grid last year. I know it's, there's a lot of debate around it. I think Max Verstappen is clear number one. And then, some people have Charles Leclerc in there. Some people have George Russell in second place for them. Some people have Lando Norris. That is me included. Others have, other drivers along the grid. Fernando Alonso also gets talked about in that kind of second best season in terms of 2022. But for me, Lando Norris is the one. For me, Lando Norris is the second best driver on the Formula One grid after Max Verstappen, probably in 2022, and then definitely again, sort of top 5, I would say, in 2021 as well. He was absolutely sensational and still only 23, as it says. Going into his 5th season in Formula One, and I'm kind of at the point where I feel like Lando Norris's head might be turned. I'm massively positive about Lando Norris's future and Lando Norris showing that he can be one of the best Formula One drivers that there is of this generation. I think about the fact that we will in the future talk about him amongst Max Verstappen, George Russell, Charles Leclerc. I think we will talk about Lando Norris in the same vein as those guys. Maybe Max Verstappen is starting to separate himself out from that crowd now, especially if he goes on to win, 3, 4, 5 world titles. I can't see Lando Norris doing that. I can't see Lando Norris getting, multiple world championships where he's, winning 5 or 6. But I can see Lando Norris maybe picking up 1 if he does go to a team that can give him a car and deliver him a car that he is comfortable with and can show his abilities in without feeling too much pressure. As it talks about here, we've got that maiden pole position in Russia. We've got that possible win that could have been in Russia. He was the only driver in 2022 outside of the top 6 to pick up a podium. All right, it was very, very lucky. Yes, you had both of the Ferraris making mistakes, both of the Mercedes also not looking quick at the start of the season. So it's a little bit lucky on his part that he kind of just was there. But you've got to be there. You've got to put yourself in that situation for me when it comes to Lando Norris. But as I said, I feel like this is the season where his head might be turned. I think when he signed that contract with McLaren coming into this season, I think he signed that contract a little bit on the back of the fact that we had Seidl still at the helm of the team. I think Seidl leaving is a massive, massive blow to McLaren. Like, one of the worst things that could have happened for this team is they lose Seidl. I think Seidl is like the next up-and-coming team principal that you're gonna want. I think Audi have done an incredible job at snapping him away from McLaren. And I think McLaren should have done and could have maybe done everything that they possibly could to keep hold of him. I think he came into the team. I know Zach Brown came in sort of a similar time. Zach Brown then decided to change things up, decided to get Seidel in, and that was probably the best decision that Zach Brown has made. Like he got in my opinion, the perfect person. And that's not saying that Andreas Stella, who has taken the role this season, won't be really, really good. But I think Seidel, like for Stella to be on the level of Seidel again, for us to have back-to-back team principals of that level coming into it fairly fresh, fairly young, you know. It's not like Christian Horner or Toto Wolff who have like been around the block, been there for a very, very long time, or even like your Vasseurs, your Tosts, you know, people of that ilk that have been in and around Formula One for long enough. Andreas Seidel came in and for me completely changed it. And I think Lando Norris was hoping that he would continue to drive McLaren forward in that kind of way. Now that he's left, I think Lando Norris moving into this year will feel less need to stay with McLaren and also less hope that McLaren can deliver him a proper top draw car. I think McLaren's season hinges on how well Piastri drives. That is a good point. Let's talk about Piastri as well then, whilst we're here. Obviously, his debut season in Formula One. But again, he's kind of put himself under a lot of pressure, right? He has put himself in a little bit of a pressure cooker situation in that Alpine initially announced Piastri as the replacement for the Aston Martin-bound Fernando Alonso. But the 21-year-old Australian had already signed a preliminary deal with McLaren. Like, we all know what happened there with Oscar Piastri, and I think we all know that Oscar Piastri is also, in a similar vein to Lando Norris, one of those drivers that is coming into Formula One and could be right at that level. That is sort of the next iteration, right? We've got that kind of group that I talked about with Russell, all kind of going into their 4th, 5th, 6th years of Formula One. Whereas Piastri coming in his first, I think we could talk about him being kind of that next step, that next generation. I think you can split generations by about 5 seasons, 6 seasons or so. He's kind of that next ilk of Formula One driver, which is weird because Lando Norris is only 2 years older than him, but Lando Norris has had 5 seasons of experience coming into this year, or 4 seasons of experience coming into this year, going into his 5th season. But yeah, Piastri, I think, has put himself under a lot of pressure. Like a lot of pressure, and also has the added pressure of being a Formula 2 champion, of being a test driver for a big team in Alpine. Like, Alpine have a structure, and because they are not a, you know, partner team to anybody else, they make their own car, they make their own engine. Alpine are very much one of the big boys when it comes to the Formula One grid, and the fact that he has shunned Alpine, who are looking to also make steps forward, actually beat out McLaren to 4th place last year, I think is a big amount of pressure to put on himself. Like, you can already see the headlines, right? If Alpine come out of the blocks this season, Ocon and Gasly both finish ahead of Norris and Piastri, people are already going to be criticizing Piastri for, did he make the right decision? Did he not choose the right team? Should he have stayed at Alpine? Would his career have been better if he stayed at Alpine? Like, we're going to get that even after just this season, or even after just like a 3 or 4 races. If Alpine are clearly quicker than McLaren, people are going to start to question Oscar Piastri's decision-making, but also they're going to start to question him in McLaren. Secondly to that, he's going into a situation where Daniel Ricciardo, let's face it, failed. Daniel Ricciardo did not deliver the expectation that McLaren had for him. I think when they signed Daniel Ricciardo, they thought of him being the next number 1 in the team, right? They thought Daniel Ricciardo was going to come in, be this huge signing for the McLaren team, right? He'd won multiple Grand Prix. He was coming in alongside a very fresh Lando Norris who had kind of gone through it with Carlos Sainz, was getting closer and closer to Carlos Sainz, but Carlos Sainz had always kind of been the father figure of the two. And I think they wanted Daniel Ricciardo to come in and similarly do that kind of role where he was going to be the team number 1 whilst Lando Norris still developed for that next couple of years. In that couple of years, Lando Norris has put Daniel Ricciardo to the slaughter. Daniel Ricciardo has not been able to adjust to the team at all. And Daniel Ricciardo has ended up being shunned by McLaren a year early and ended up having to go to a testing role at an old team that he left because he wanted more. We have to remember, Daniel Ricciardo left Red Bull because he didn't want to be a number 2 to Max Verstappen, because he thought he was good enough to have a team built around him. And now he's going back to being a testing driver for Max Verstappen and helping to, again, shape the team around Max Verstappen. Like, it's quite embarrassing for Daniel Ricciardo. And therefore, with Oscar Piastri coming in to replace Daniel Ricciardo in that way, somebody who had already proven he was so good in Formula One, again, that just adds more pressure for me. It adds even more pressure to Oscar Piastri for this next season. It's just going to be so tricky for McLaren moving forward this year. There's so much that could go wrong. There's so much that could go right. Don't get me wrong. Oscar Piastri comes out of the gate absolutely flying, and Lando Norris comes out of the gate still at top form, even with Seidel gone. Stella is able to continue the development of the team and push it forward a little bit, although he's said that there's not massive amounts that they can move forward without a new wind tunnel. That new wind tunnel is coming, so maybe he can, still instill that, like, sense of drive in Lando Norris to want to be the McLaren man, as opposed to someone who is going to move to a bigger team in the future, possibly a Mercedes, possibly a Red Bull, and take that next step forward. Let's talk about last season. Just to kind of summarize, I think we've talked about both drivers fairly well there. But last season was a tale of two halves. We kind of touched upon the fact that it was a little bit embarrassing for Daniel Ricciardo, that he couldn't really get to grips with that McLaren car. The McLaren team, also embarrassing for them because they couldn't get this multiple race winner into a situation where he was comfortable in the car. They couldn't adapt the car to him either. It was just a little bit silly when it came to Daniel Ricciardo, but Lando Norris continued that trajectory that he's on of being one of the best on the grid. And maybe it is the car that just really suits him. Maybe it is the McLaren team sort of realized fairly early on that Daniel Ricciardo was not going to be in the team for very much longer, and therefore kind of leaned on Norris a little bit more. But Lando Norris just continued to rack up the points, as it says here, and absolutely obliterate Ricciardo when it came to the driver's standings, right? And also was carrying that team towards a fourth place in the Constructors. You could argue that, okay, if Daniel Ricciardo got more points, they would have finished higher in the Constructors' Championship, obviously. If Daniel Ricciardo could have just even been at like 90% of Lando Norris, they would have comfortably beat Alpine. But also you could argue that, Fernando Alonso was probably the most unlucky driver on the entire grid. And there's a lot of times where Lando Norris probably would have been beaten by Fernando Alonso had it not been for Fernando Alonso losing out on some kind of reliability issue or some kind of incident that wasn't really his fault. It's so tough moving into this year. I think we've got the greatest achievement, the history. I don't think we need to delve into that too much. But this season, having dropped from third to fifth in the space of 2 seasons, again, it's just like, are we going to see that spiral downwards? Because the teams around them are getting quicker and quicker. And the thing is, I think with the adaptation of the 2022 regulations, I was expecting Ferrari to stay ahead. I didn't think we'd be battling with Ferrari again in 2022 as we were in 2021. I didn't expect Alpine to be as good as they were, though. I think I remember at the beginning of the 2022 season saying McLaren will be comfortably 4th place, like nowhere near the top 3, but also nowhere near 5th. I thought we were going to kind of be in our like no man's land 4th place, where we were so far ahead of 5th place, but kind of a little bit behind 3rd place, where it was never like talked about us being in the top 3. Now, I honestly think we're right in that mix. I don't know if we're going to be able to overcome Alpine. Esteban Ocon still looks really, really good. I really like Pierre Gasly. I think he's very, very talented as well. And I think if he's comfortable in that Alpine car, he will do well and he'll deliver in terms of qualifyings, and therefore puts yourself in a really good position for those races to pick up points. Also, I think Oscar Piastri is a little bit of a gamble as opposed to Aston Martin, who I think are the other team that could start to put themselves in this talking point for 5th place in the championship, which kind of makes me worried because I really like the Fernando Alonso move for them. I think Fernando Alonso is a little bit of an upgrade on Sebastian Vettel on form right now. You can talk all day about whether or not Sebastian Vettel or Fernando Alonso is a better Formula One driver over the course of their career. in 2022, Fernando Alonso was the better driver. That just is the case. In 2022, Fernando Alonso was a better driver than Sebastian Vettel, and therefore, moving forward into 2023, if you had to pick one for your team, it would probably be Fernando Alonso. I know they've been handed that because Sebastian Vettel is retiring, but they had to still convince Fernando Alonso that he was going to be able to at least match where he was in the Alpine car. And that kind of worries me. If they're convincing Fernando Alonso that next season, this season, 2023, they're going to be able to battle with the likes of Alpine, then moving forward, they're also going to be looking at battling with the likes of McLaren. And we know how hard it is to get points in Formula One right now because those top 6 spaces are basically locked down every single Grand Prix. So you're looking at 4 more spaces. And, 2 Alpines, 2 Aston Martins goes in there quite comfortably, doesn't it? And then you're looking at McLaren, whether or not they can do it. Anyway, the livery drop is going to be starting momentarily. So let me not continue to ramble on. And instead, see if I can find myself the McLaren stream. But yeah, I'd like to know what you guys think. Sort of the future and this season of McLaren looks like, because as I said, I'm a little bit worried, just a touch, for what this season might hold. Papaya boys are back. Oh yeah, I forgot they are calling it the MCL 60 because it's 60 years. I think that's a nice touch from them, actually. Although it does make me wonder, when they get to the MCL 60 in, what do we, like 20 years' time, do they skip it? The launch. Bada bing, bada boom. Sorry to interrupt, but I was right about the pattern on the AlphaTauri livery color swap. You were right. The fact that they have gone like white navy, white navy, white navy is a bit strange, isn't it? But I suppose it kind of makes sense. If you've got 2 colors that you predominantly use them both. It is mad how many series McLaren are in right now, right? They've taken up the Formula E mantle as well from Mercedes. We're still in IndyCar. The Extreme E as well. Bit mad, isn't it? Hey, it's Vigstar. Madness. Absolute madness. After 2023, Norris leaves because of the bad car. I honestly feel like Lando Norris is possibly out the door after the 2023 season. I don't think it's like crazy to think that he'll leave at the end of this year. Perez leaves Red Bull, opening the door to join Red Bull. Lewis will retire, letting Perez join Mercedes. Perez to Mercedes is a no for me. The rest of that I could see happening. Here they are, the boys. Lando and Oscar. It's weird because we haven't got to see like loads of Oscar Piastri yet. I wonder if he'll kind of sort of step up to the mantle a little bit. Because Lando Norris is like one of the personalities of the Formula One grid, right? And so was Daniel Ricciardo. So like Oscar Piastri again has got big shoes to fill in terms of like being part of the team off track as well as on track, right? Palou fills the McLaren seat. I do like that shout. I do like that shout. I've started to put together my 2024 predictions, 2023, 2024 predictions that will all kind of be coming out end of this week, next week, once all the cars have been revealed. And there's a few kind of surprises in there that I like. I see Formula One like the Premier League. Standing still will not be good enough to stay where you are. Exactly, yeah. And I think McLaren have stood still for a couple of years, if I'm honest, and that's why we've seen Ferrari step massively forward. We've seen Alpine take their place as well, fourth in the standings last year. I think Aston Martin could take fifth, and again that kind of drops McLaren a little bit further back. I am worried. I'm genuinely worried about McLaren moving into next season. Ooh. I don't know. I feel like, are the drivers looking forward to Vegas? I feel like the drivers are looking forward to Vegas more so because it's like an event rather than it being like a really good track. You know what I mean? It's not like, you know, when like Vettel talks about Suzuka, I don't think anybody is going to talk about Vegas in like those terms. But I feel like a few of the drivers will talk about Vegas as being like one of the best places to visit on the grid as opposed to one of the best tracks. When is the car revealed, mate? If I knew, if I could tell you that, I'd be some kind of psychic. We are currently in the live stream though. The MCL 60, having a little chat to Lando, having a little chat to Oscar. Ricardo look forward to Vegas the most. Awkward, isn't it? I mean, he'll still be around. He'll probably turn up for that one, right? Oh, we're moving along. Zach Brown and Andrea Stella, the boys 2.0. I wonder what Zach Brown will have to say, to be fair. I imagine he's a little bit frustrated that Seidel has gone. It's kind of his guy, wasn't he? Ooh. Off topic, but do you think Mick Schumacher will get a drive in 23? Probably not. I don't think so. I think the Alfa Romeo Sauber seat is maybe the only one I'd have him linked with. Possibly an Alpha Tauri drive, but I think there's enough Red Bull Juniors, and also they couldn't get that over the line last year, so I can't see them getting it over the line this year either. I think Mick Schumacher's kind of in a little bit of a tough place. Because if you look at it, right, like Ferrari, he's not going to go back there. And also, he's not going to replace either of the Ferrari guys. Mercedes won't. They've got him in as a testing driver, but he's not going to replace Lewis Hamilton anytime soon. Red Bull, no. AlphaTauri, no. Aston Martin, no. McLaren, no. Like, it just sort of goes on and on down the grid. I think Alfa Romeo Sauber might be the only one where it's like a maybe. Zach Brown does manage to absolutely smash the sponsors, though, to be fair, doesn't he? Like, if you just look at the sponsor board on the McLaren car, it is absolutely mad. Like, the huge names that he has brought to that McLaren team, they must be able to start upgrading the behind the scenes a little bit. Just a little bit. Like, you don't get Google, Jack Daniels, Coca-Cola, Hilton, like just naming a few of the companies that are on behind them, right? And they must be able to start upgrading a little bit of the behind the scenes. Ooh. Biggest challenge. Just keep getting better is basically what they said. Andreas, what's the trickiest thing to do this season? Keep improving. That's basically the one. Here we go then. Odds on it being orange. Here we go. Oh. Oh, okay. That's a little cutaway. Little cutaway. Lando Norris putting together his cart, of course. Wow. Big words. I do like the McLaren are one of these like historied teams in Formula One, right? And the fact that they've been McLaren the whole time. They haven't gone through these iterations. They're kind of the Ferrari. It's like McLaren, Ferrari, and Williams, right? They're kind of the three teams that are left that haven't gone through any of these like massive structure changes or team changes and big things like that. I guess you could include Haas in that. Haas also haven't gone through any changes in terms of management or haven't gone from like team to team to team. But Haas started in 2016, whereas as we can see, you know, your McLarens, your Ferraris, your Williamses of the world have been around the block a little bit in terms of your Formula One teams. Just the level of driver that have been at McLaren, right? They're not done yet. There he is, Oscar Piastri, the man, the myth. Some beautiful old school McLarens. Oh my goodness me. What I would give to own a McLaren car would not be healthy, I don't think. Just all of Lando's successes. Don't worry about the fact that it was actually Ricciardo that won the race. Just all of Lando's success. There you go. Lovely, lovely. Can we see? Okay, okay. We're still building up. Still building up. The car is a coming. Can see it coming around the corner though. They're kind of hinting at a little bit more of like a lighter blue, maybe. I think it's going to be predominantly orange with maybe well, lots of cars have been quite black this season. Oh, it is quite black. Okay, so McLaren have gone the same route. They've gone the same kind of route. They've gone for a heavier black influence on the car so they can save more weight when it comes to the paint job. I mean, again, the two McLaren colours are sensational. The orange and the blue just always are going to work together in exceptional fashion. But yeah, a predominantly black McLaren. Just again to strip back on that paintwork. I do love the Google Chrome wheels, though, you know. I do have to say, I love the Google Chrome wheels. I love that all the Formula One cars are just black now. They're just like, how can we save weight? Make all of the car black. Alfa Romeo have gone that way. Haas have gone that way. A lot of teams are now just going, more black is better. Does it actually look like this year's car, though? I mean, the side pods do look a little bit different to last year's car. So this might be like a... Again, though, I just don't feel like this is going to be the exact car that we're going to see when it comes to 2023 and like Bahrain. You know what I mean? I feel like there's still going to be adaptations that go on over the next few weeks. And also just things that are going to change. Strong downwash. Love the packaging. Cooling. Decent undercut. Exactly. It's kind of, well, again, everyone's kind of leaning towards that that Red Bull style look, right? In terms of the side pod design. Be interested to see if Mercedes also go that way. And Ferrari, to be fair, because Alfa Romeo, the other car that we've kind of seen that has actually had some changes to it. You can see how the Alfa Romeo has moved to more of a Red Bull / Ferrari. It's kind of tried to take the best of both almost with the Alfa Romeo car this year. I think this McLaren car leans slightly more heavily to the Red Bull side of things. Although it does have those kind of fins, those gills, the cooling system that Ferrari have kind of gone for over the course of their car in 2022, right? It does have that similar kind of feel to it as well. So it's kind of a merge of the two. It's interesting that that's kind of the thought process, is that somewhere between Ferrari and Red Bull is the key, you know. As with anything in Formula One, over the course of this generation, we're going to get more and more cars kind of moving towards the perfect design. And then eventually what we're going to have is like in 2025, moving into 2026, they're all going to look exactly the same. And then 2026, the regulation changes again. So it'll just completely mix it up. But I think this is all kind of moving towards a halfway house between Red Bull and Ferrari from the 2022 season. And McLaren have kind of gone that way as well. But it does look like this is coming to an end. Therefore, it is coming to an end. Therefore, I'm going to scroll back a little. And just, again, not to take away views from the McLaren team themselves. And therefore, not be, that kind of guy. But now I can show you because it's finished. So, as I was saying, like this undercut. And this kind of these kind of fins, these heating, cooling, no, definitely not heating up the engine. These cooling louvres are very Ferrari, but then this side pod design, almost with like a little letterbox at the front. If I can move forward a little bit, this kind of letterbox at the front with a big undercut is almost very Red Bull. So I think most teams are kind of going for that middle package. In terms of the livery, though, if we kind of just look at it as is. If I scroll back just a touch, kind of look at it just as is. Again, predominantly black, right? Move into this very heavy black influence in the middle. Little bit of orange across the top. The lovely light blue. I do always love the blue that McLaren go for, and the combination they have with the blue and the orange. But a predominantly black livery. And again, it's that weight saving, right? We're looking at, again, another team who has realized, if we're going to get anywhere near this weight, the limit, every single car wants to get to the weight limit, or at least the minimum in terms of that weight limit. So there's a range that the Formula One cars have to sit within. And, we always saw like cars before where drivers would like stuff their suits with like spanners and so on to try and like get the weight to exactly that minimum. Cars that we're having, or the problem that the teams are having in 2022 moving into 2023 is still lots of teams are nowhere near that minimum weight. Loads of teams are nowhere near that minimum weight. And again, we're seeing all of those teams that are nowhere near the minimum weight starting to just take off everything that they can. And paint, unfortunately, although it makes the car look lovely, is kind of pointless at the end of the day. Like the weight is what really counts, and we want to finish higher, not look better. As much as Formula One has become a little bit of a fashion show as well as a racing series, the racing always has to come first. And now we're seeing that, right? So more black liveries, but this side pod design, if this is what they go for, which again, I don't think will be exactly what we see on the car in Bahrain, I can see this having quite a few changes before sort of 2-3 weeks time. I like it. It's given me more hope. It's given me more hope that they're developing in the right direction, because we've seen it from Alfa Romeo. I think that all the teams, when teams are going for a similar sort of thing, it makes me feel like that is the optimal. You know what I mean? Like if you've got 10 incredible aerodynamicists or teams of aerodynamicists, like the best aerodynamicists in the world, and you've got 10 lots of them, and you give them a problem and they all come up with the same result, you sort of assume that's going to be the best one. Obviously, they don't, right? They all come up with a slightly different result to each other initially, and that's what we saw in 2022. They all came up with a slightly different result. Mercedes kind of being the most out there, Red Bull and Ferrari kind of being the most dominant, and we saw more and more teams sort of edge towards Ferrari and Red Bull. Like the Haas looked very Ferrari-like towards the end of the year. Obviously, the Aston Martin looked very Red Bull-like towards the end of the year, and we started to see those aerodynamicists move in that direction. When that happens, you start to almost feel like the game has been solved, right? The aerodynamics of these cars is starting to get solved by these guys as they continue to develop. And the fact that McLaren are running in that same direction does give me a little bit more hope for this season. But again, as I said at the beginning, I'm still very worried. I'm worried that Andrea Stella won't be as good as Seidel. I'm worried that he won't be able to push the team in the direction they need, because I think even Seidel was struggling to really push them forwards, and therefore Stella coming in as his first time as a team principal is going to struggle even more so. I'm worried that Aston Martin and Alpine are going to get better. I'm worried that we were already so far off the top three. Aston Martin coming in might snatch 5th place off of us. Then you're looking at us battling with like Alfa Romeo for 6th place or basically 7th place. And that's just a massive step backwards considering we were fighting for 3rd place just 2 seasons ago. And then I'm worried that Lando Norris is going to leave. I'm genuinely really, really worried. I know he's just signed a contract, but those contracts are worth nothing in Formula One. You know, Pierre Gasly signed a contract months before he then went to Alpine. Daniel Ricciardo is still supposed to be in a McLaren car for another year. I'm genuinely really worried that Lando Norris is out the door by the end of this season and move into a team that is showing a little bit more in terms of going forward, especially if we're battling with Alfa Romeo. Lando Norris moving in and being like the #1 at Audi and almost being like, okay, it's like Hamilton all over again, right? He's at the McLaren team. The McLaren team is pretty good, maybe moving in the right direction, but Hamilton then starts to realize that it's falling backwards, and he decides, you know what, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to go to Mercedes. It was criticized a lot of the time. People did not like Lewis Hamilton's move to Mercedes, and he's just won 6 championships. Lando Norris could be on a similar sort of path where he sort of sees this regression of McLaren again. They kind of get to their peak where they were, 3rd in the championship in 2021, finished in 4th, then finished in 5th in 2022. And then that slow regression of McLaren again before they get that next kind of bounce back that they can have. And he then makes that move to Audi, becomes the #1 at Audi, the new kid on the block, the team with a lot of prospects, but not really anything behind them right now. And maybe that's the way forward. Maybe that's the way forward. I want to see a front elevation with the cooling as it is. I think the side pods are quite narrow. Let's have a little gander if we can do that for you. Here we go. Maybe. No. There was like a sweeping shot from the front. There we go. Oh, no, it's not from the front, though, is it? It's like from on top, which is quite annoying. This is what I mean. You've kind of got this Ferrari shape to the side pod, but then the design of the side pod more so looking closer to a Red Bull. A bit weird. The new livery is very similar to their Abu Dhabi last one. That is very true. Kind of disappointing the amount of black we're seeing on these cars. But yeah, it is annoying. It's frustrating, right? It takes away from the kind of showmanship of Formula One. Like, I always really wanted Alpine to go pink. I think when they started off the season as pink, it was more distinct. You could definitely tell an instant difference between an Alpine and a Williams. But then throughout the season, they were very similar shades of blue. Obviously, you could still tell which was which, but at a glance, I feel like, you see Ferrari, you're red. You see McLaren's the orange. You see Red Bull has that kind of dark purpley color. I like when Mercedes are silver, to be fair. I prefer when Mercedes are silver to black. I think they might go back to black just because we're seeing lots of teams moving in that direction. But I do like when Mercedes is silver. I like when your team has a very distinct color. I do enjoy that about Formula One. Maybe that's just me and a little bit of OCD or something along those lines. But I do like it. I think the McLaren is good. But I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna leave it there because I feel like I've been very negative and very positive in sort of equal amounts about McLaren. I am worried, but also I'm hopeful. I'm up, but I'm down. I'm left, up, I'm right. Me and Katy Perry have a lot in common right now, but we're going to be back in like an hour or two for Aston Martin, and I'm hoping the Aston Martin looks terrible because I'm so scared that Aston Martin are going to be really quick this season. And I think Fernando Alonso moving to that team is also a big upgrade. But we'll talk about Aston Martin in a bit more detail later on. If you have enjoyed, please leave a like, subscribe, so on and so forth. And yeah, I will see you later. Hoping Aston Martin stick to the racing green. I think it's going to be green and then black. It's going to be quite black as well. It's going to be green mixed in with a lot of black. Or possibly, I hope they keep the yellow, to be honest with you. I quite like the yellow that Aston Martin uses, their secondary colour. But anyway, we'll talk about Aston Martin more later. Thank you again, and I'll see you in like a couple of hours for Aston Martin. So, you know, subscribe so you don't miss it, but also just sort of hang about. I'm going to, I don't know, sit here for a bit.